You can just imagine with me here, this is the groundbreaking ceremony. This is the time where they've come together and they're just about to start the work and laying the foundations. And there were the singers, there were the trumpeters, playing music, and they were praising the Lord for what God is allowing them to do, and a great time of rejoicing. It takes me back to probably 2009, I believe, or 2008, when we had our groundbreaking ceremony before we built this auditorium. How many people will remember that day? I think there's pictures that float around that time. But thankful that what God can do. And so here they're rejoicing over what the Lord has done. But verse 12 tells us about many of the priests and Levites and chief of the fathers, who were ancient men, that had seen the first house, when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice, and many shouted aloud for joy. I want you to see that, firstly, they encountered discouragement from insiders. There was discouragement from the insiders. The seniors who had come back from captivity remembered the old temple, remembered how big it was, how glamorous it was, and they had fond memories of the time when maybe they were little. They would go with their parents and worship there at the temple. And now coming back and rebuilding, they're finding that this new temple is not as big. It's not as big as what they used to have. And there are those who are rejoicing and singing praise to God over what the Lord's allowing them to do now, returning into Jerusalem and rebuilding the temple. But the older ones, the seniors who had seen the previous temple, are weeping and they are crying because they see that this new work is not as good as the old work. It's very frustrating when you have someone who is always negative about the work. Very discouraging to young people when they're trying to serve the Lord with what they can in this present day, with different temptations and different oppositions to what maybe some of us older ones had seen in yesteryears. And when they hear us saying, well, it's not as good as what it used to be. It wasn't as good as when we were back in our prime, when churches were full and Bible colleges were full. When we begin to speak that way, we discourage a present generation. And it weakens their hands. Young people will look and say, well, if it is that bad, why are we even attempting to do anything? Why are we even progressing if all we hear from the older generation is how good it used to be in the past, but it's not as good anymore today? Haggai, the prophet, said this to them, to the elderly, in Haggai chapter 2, verse 3, Who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? Sometimes we do that, don't we? Sometimes we look at how church is going today. We see the different things that are taking place, and we say, well, there's no fervent spirit like how it used to be. There's no more true worshippers like it used to be. There's no more people who are filled with the Holy Spirit that can do a mighty work the way it used to be. And I'm sad to hear when we say these kind of things, because our God hasn't changed. He's ever present, and He still supplies great power for today. And if you're an older gentleman, an older lady in the faith, please do not discourage the younger ones. Please encourage them that as God was with you back in those days, God is with them today. And God will do great and mighty things for us in this present day as He did in the past. I've heard some who would say, gone are the glory days of when we used to be in Croydon Park. How many people have heard that? We've said that. Back those days, I love those days when we were back at Croydon Park. God has done marvelous things in our eyes to be where we are today. And may I remind you that the auditorium in Croydon Park was only one row that you see over there. Look at us today. We are occupying almost a full auditorium. That is the hand of God. That is the work of God. And we ought to be careful how we speak of the past. We ought to thank God for the past, but trust Him for the present. Otherwise, we can discourage one another over what God is doing. These